Welcome to the Berks Homes podcast, the business of building homes. I'm Katie, here with my brother Ben, and today we are talking about budgets. It's budget season, and it's not just about the numbers. That's what we really want to talk about today.
Yes.
Why is it not just about the numbers to you?
Well, budgeting is so easy for me personally because I do a personal budget.
Right.
Personal finance budget.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at budgeting as like the framework, the ability to execute your goals,
Mm-hmm.
right? So whenever I want to do something with my money, I make sure there's a plan for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no different with business. I think the difference with a business is you do have a season for it, the planning season that is like really intense, and there's so many moving parts because I think for most people out there, if you're doing a personal budget, you're kind of like knowing already what you're going to have on the income side.
Mm-hmm.
And most likely it's not dependent upon the market.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm sure people that do budgeting in general would call themselves conservative
Mm-hmm.
by nature, but there's still some risk out there for people in their work life and stuff. But I look at it as it's just the opportunity to name what you care about.
Yes.
And so for me, it's like a monthly thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a month by month thing. For businesses, our business, it's an annual thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get to decide and put numbers attached to those decisions on what we want to do.
Right. And what we care about.
And some of it is a little predictive,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're like rubbing the genie bottle a little bit, kind of looking out and seeing, I think this is what's going to happen on the revenue side.
Mm-hmm.
And then, kind of like wargaming until you get to a final number for expenses and net profit.
Mm-hmm. So before we get into why it's not just about the numbers, we do have to talk about the numbers a little bit and kind of the strategy that we put in place for deciding that top line. I think we've talked about this, repeatedly on, different episodes and things where we're talking about our philosophy on predicting settlements.
Mm-hmm.
But each, time we've done it, budget or reforecast season, I think you have refined, because you spend a lot of time on this personally, on the operation side. You have kind of refined your philosophy to a pretty conservative point by now. So what changed, or where are you at with that with this last go round for our
26
settlements for 26?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the reality of our business is there's no absolutes. There's no 100% ironclad predictable result that you can count on over and over and over.
Right.
There's too many variables. So using historical examples and kind of like what the state of the world is, I say world like land development world.
Yeah.
I think I went even more conservative than normal because every land development project has its own twist and turn.
Yeah.
And so this year we have to assume that everybody that the budget is shared with, which is the whole company, we have to assume that everybody's driven and motivated to excel and go beyond whatever is given.
We don't need to create a stretch goal to have the people we have here naturally want to stretch.
Right.
They're going to do it regardless of what that number is.
So there's like a little bit of a, maturation process that goes into having a conservative budget because you're like putting something out. This is our budget, but I'm expecting to beat it. It's kind of a weird thing, right? Because if we put a budget out with a certain number and we hit it, we should be happy, right?
Yeah.
We're kind of hedging our bets a little bit with this one because of the unknowns with land development and the market, obviously. And so that mindset is what I started with. And it's also, there's another school of thought which is really hard and way too time intensive to do. Some businesses, they'll build 3 budgets every year,
Right.
which we could. It would just be a little rougher for the other 2.
Mm-hmm.
You have like an expected, a stretch, and then like an ultra worst case.
Yeah.
And I think that at the end of the day, if you can only stick with one, you always do the ultra worst case.
Yes.
Because then you start talking about like, if this happens, what decisions have to be made.
Right. Exactly. The other important factor in making that choice is we believe by keeping it that ultra conservative, we have an expectation for doing things really well then. Yes. We know we have the resources we need to do this number of units next year really well. We know that in order to exceed it, we're not chasing something, we're not cutting corners, we're not doing things out of order or improperly. This is how we know we can make this number and do it really well for each other, for the customers. That's the intention.
And you never want to, like, the mindset that we have going into this is you never want to have the market as your number one driver for that success.
Yeah.
So being a little more conservative helps that.
Yes. Yeah. Like when we set our goals for the past year and a half, 2 years, we're looking at the possibility of what we could do.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, if we're looking at what we know we can do versus what the ceiling is.
Yeah.
We're looking at the floor versus the ceiling now.
Right.
The big difference between hitting that ceiling and staying at the floor that we've been is the market. And it is the change in the land development world.
Right.
And 2 years ago, we couldn't have predicted that. What we can predict now is what we have seen happening over the past year. So if we kind of just extrapolate what's happened over the past year into next year, we believe that we have been conservative in our budget.
Yeah. And it's so much easier to make decisions on something additional or extra when it's there.
Yes.
Right. So it's a lot
not
harder.
Less.
Yeah. To have a higher number and not hit it and then be like, shoot, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
If we spit out a number at the end of this budget that we're not comfortable with today, then we make decisions today.
Yes.
On how to affect that number. But you don't want to build a fake budget and 3/4 of the year, see that's not going to happen. Now what do we do?
Exactly.
It can be very deflating too.
Yeah.
I think everybody likes to set a goal and achieve it.
Yes.
There's so much momentum that can be created mentally, just hitting your goals. And then you stretch a little bit from there. You stretch a little bit from there.
Yeah.
So yeah, we don't want the number one, we don't want the market to dictate our success. And number two, it's about, setting something achievable that people can be proud of.
Yes.
And like you said, giving them time and space to execute their jobs really well.
Exactly.
And throughout all the markets that we've ever, been through, when things slow down as they have over the last year, like you said, there's always a tremendous amount of opportunity too. And so that's when you really hit the gas pedal, when you can take advantage of opportunities that others can't.
Exactly.
Because they're stretched too much.
Yep. See, we're just being, methodical. And I feel like it's like I'm talking to Dad right now.
Oh, yeah. It's my middle name. One of the things that we've talked about a lot, maybe not on the podcast, but at least in the building and together, is the ownership aspect of budgeting. Like if we talk about what we're going through with these budget meetings, by department, by leadership team, all that stuff, we're trying to create that idea of ownership that is delegated.
Yeah.
Right. And, when you have hundreds of millions of dollars that pass through a system on an annual basis, it's easy to get a lot of it just lost.
Yes.
If you don't delegate specific ownership,
If someone isn't assigned to stare at it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
their own section.
Yep.
Right. And so we do have those individual owners of the managers of their budgets,
Mm-hmm.
and we want them to be very familiar,
Mm-hmm.
just like you would at home. When you're in charge of your money,
Right.
Personally, most of us expect that we keep a handle on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. But then if you're married, let's just assume that's what this is like.
Yeah.
You're married and you have somebody else to share your expenses and income with.
Mm-hmm.
You need to communicate.
Right.
And so that's why we have the bigger meetings.
Mm-hmm.
So we can talk about, my budget might affect yours a little bit.
Mm-hmm. How does my decisions
Right.
impact your decisions?
Right.
And your planning.
Right. And that's why, I think just to make it super basic, like
Mm-hmm.
when we make a bunch of sales, when we have a good sales month,
Mm-hmm.
everybody gets excited.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's
Mhm.
not just the sales team,
Mm-hmm.
but they're creating, by creating great sales activity, you're creating room for everybody else
Mhm.
and their budgets.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's a personal process first, and then it's collaborative.
Yeah. Yeah. And it starts again with setting the stage for what we think, predicting what we think is going to happen next year in terms of sales
Yeah.
and settlements, I should say, more
Right.
so than anything else. And then deciding where to use what we have
Mm-hmm.
and where to put that focus from a department standpoint, but then as a whole.
Yep.
Because we can all put our wish list in for where we want to put those dollars, what we think, me as my department cares about accomplishing this, and I need these things to do so. Sometimes as a group, we have to come up with if that gets priority or not next year.
Why don't you, do you have any examples of why it needs to be a collaborative process specifically?
We're looking at this as planning on putting our dollars where we care.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We might need to say, okay, if we need to hit this many settlements next year, this team needs these tools to do so because they have nothing, or their thing is broken perhaps,
Or they've maxed it out.
So it's an absolute requirement. We will not meet this goal unless the dollars go here.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes other departments might just want it to make it easier.
Sure.
So the priority kind of goes, what's broken? What's the constraint from meeting the goal? The only way to meet our settlements goal is if we open this community and start selling homes. Well, it's in a brand new location and we don't have a sales consultant. Well,
Right.
budgeted dollars go to hiring a sales consultant first.
Yeah.
The end. Because we can't sell them unless we hire someone.
No revenue.
So that's an easy decision. A more difficult decision might be deciding if we need this software or that software, or if we need to invest in training or not.
Some of the soft skill stuff.
Exactly.
That's difficult.
What else do you think of, like, as an example of where we would kind of like collaborate on where to spend?
That was a great example, because like sales dictates so much of it, right? So,
our business is selling and building.
Right.
So those are our priorities. That's
Right.
where we invest the most money.
Yeah.
Selling and building.
Exactly. But you always need to start with the top line, right? You need to know or predict how much you're going to get in the door, because then that tells you how much you have to spend. And so I think it's the collaboration really starts around like the entire company understanding where the sales are coming from.
Yeah.
To your point, like geographically, that really matters, because if it's a new area, then you automatically need a new sales rep.
Yeah.
And you probably need a new superintendent.
Correct.
And you probably need a new detail carpenter. And you probably need a new warranty guy.
Yes.
And those are just people, right?
Exactly.
And then logistically, how do you handle some of the other stuff that is, supporting that new area? But beyond that, I mean, this might be a fake example, but yeah, like you have a system that maxes out at a certain amount of people that
Yeah.
can use it. And you're like, well, we have these new communities, so we're going to add this many sales, and boom, we're capped out at this many users on this system. Then you have to entertain new software. And a lot of times we have that, like, that doesn't pop up overnight, right? Like that's usually like in a 2-year kind of planning cycle, something like that. And
we know it's coming.
Yeah. And obviously we've been developing our own software for years on a lot of this stuff. So we have, that's also a big part of the collaboration, right?
Yeah.
Like this year, we're going to be investing more in the final push for this piece of the software. And so that's almost like a sales rep. You're like, well, we're not doing that because we have to finish it.
Exactly.
So that's set aside. And I think almost going back to like the family personal budget example, you know, maybe you get your kids involved too. And somebody has to make the decision at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's saying this is a number one priority, and there's only $100 and this all adds up to $3,000. So then you might look over at your salesperson and be like, can we get more, or do we have $100?
Right.
What we're kind of saying right now and trying to be conservative is let's stick with the $100 and let's figure out how we can get it done for $100.
Well, I think that's why I think budgeting is fun, because
it's problem solving.
Yeah, after we get through the parameters where we're saying conservatively, this is what we think we're going to get, and max out what we think our expenses are, because those are two things that have to happen at the same time. Worst case scenario on what the revenue is, worst case scenario on what the expenses are.
Right.
You do both of those.
Right.
Maybe not worst case, but you know what I'm saying, like conservative case.
Conservative case, yeah.
Then the fun happens after the budget is out, where you try to do better on both sides.
Right.
We know that worst case scenario, this is the limited amount coming in and the most amount going out.
Yes.
How do we bring in more and spend less?
Right.
And that to me is, as we're going through the budget planning, and again, that's setting the stage for what our plans are. You're not only looking at setting goals for what you want to accomplish in terms of selling and building more homes, you're setting goals of how you're going to spend your time to beat it.
Right.
You can look at the budget and go, okay, we've said last year we spent over $500,000 on community dumpsters. Can I put a little time and effort into figuring out how to spend less on that?
I hate that number so much.
I know. Isn't it insane?
Yeah. You're only saying that because that's in one of my departments.
It's our company. Yeah. I don't put that on anybody. That's not that's the scale.
But to your point, like, can we find a way to spend less than that?
Yeah, who wants to be on the dumpster task force? Yeah. That's what I want to know. Like, how do we approach this problem and set aside a little bit of time and resources on some big ticket items like that, where, you know, we've got so many smart people. So many people who have ideas. They're living this day to day, and they're going, why are we doing it that way? Why don't we just do this?
Well, this calendar year is a great example of it, right? Because this time last year, we identified a number of line items that we wanted to attack, and did. And I think it was a great exercise, not just to save money, but to show the team what is possible when, you know, you focus on something like that, where it's just like, let's not just get a cell phone bill every month and just say that's what it is. One of the big advantages of having a company of our size is understanding your buying power, right? And the amount of organizations out there that would love to work with us and have some sort of steady, repetitive income from a company like ours for, you know, 10% less than their competitor.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And it's a fine balance, because, you know, we're not always out there looking for the best price.
Right. It
when
is
it comes,
balanced with the relationship with the people that you're working with
right.
too. Yeah.
But something like a cell phone company, I just want it to turn on and not drop calls.
Yeah.
I think that's one of those. That's just a good example of
Mm-hmm.
we saved a tremendous amount of money just by doing some research and making some connections last year.
Exactly.
So what I don't like, this is a pet peeve of mine, when you build a budget, you have to have a level of certainty on what you're putting into it.
Mm-hmm.
The conservative piece, like you
Yeah.
were saying. I don't like putting in a lower number and saying, I'm going to get it.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Plan for what you know.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, plan for the 500 because you don't have a plan yet.
Yes.
To lower
to
it.
fix it.
Yeah. Because you might go try to execute it and you say, actually, we're getting a pretty good deal everywhere.
Right.
This is the number.
Exactly.
And then you're going to look bad.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think.
Or it might take more than a year.
It might take more than a year. That's
Everything
the other
always
thing.
takes so long. Just because you start working on something right now doesn't mean that you get the return immediately.
Yeah. The best case scenario is you go into budget season and you say, this is going to be my Q1 focus. I'm going to plug the numbers in that I know we will hit.
Mm-hmm.
And Q1, you start working your plan. By Q3, you start seeing those numbers drop.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And you win on the budget.
Mm-hmm.
But I hate in a budget when you don't like the end number and everybody goes through and just
I could get that down.
Arbitrarily cuts. Oh, I was like, that was like a 2-second conversation. Like,
what are you going to do?
Do we even know what's involved? I get so stressed out about it.
Yeah.
I'm like, we can't assume that because you want it to be a little painful when you see the final net income lower than you thought was magically going to happen.
Well, that's what I want to say is the difference between setting the plan and the budget versus what the work is then.
Yeah.
It's two completely different things.
Right.
We're predicting what we believe we can make happen and do well.
Right.
And then the work is afterwards improving it.
Right. There's tools that we have as well, like historical costs. There's kind of industry-based metrics that can guide you. So as you're going through the budget and you see all these expense line items that, you've had historically, roughly the same amounts, and then you compare it to the industry standard for, a company of your size doing the same amount of stuff, and you're like, oh, that's a little high, right? So there's both.
Yep.
There might be places where, we've been super efficient in compared to the industry that we don't want to just get lax on and let it go back to that. Alternatively, there's probably some places that you're like, oh, we always spend 1% on this and the industry standard's like 0.5%.
Right.
Then that should be like an alarm.
Exactly.
Right. So there's so many moving pieces to building a budget and that's just part of our process. Right.
Yeah.
And then there's also like personal, that's what we're talking about here, but like there's not personal, company priorities that we ignore both of those things, historical and industry.
Yes. Yeah.
And we just say, with this team, I know we can do better than both of those.
Exactly.
And it's something that we just say, hey, this is a focus this year,
Yeah. And that's the other part about like why we just go back to calling it planning all the time. It's not just us deciding how much money we're going to make. That's the least of what this season is to either one of us.
Right.
It's where are we setting our focus? Where are we setting our goals? And where are we investing? But that also means time and effort more so than dollars.
Right.
Right. And we have been pretty vocal and our goals have been very metric based and we've been very much, consistent, over the past 3-4 years where we're talking about gross profit, net contribution, customer satisfaction, days earned construction. There's just these metrics that have been really what our goals are as an organization.
Yeah.
And over the past year and a half, we've stuck to that, but we also aren't 100% aligned with that when it comes to things that we care about.
Yeah.
We think that those numbers and those metrics are very important. We have to look at them, but they are the byproduct of what our focus is.
Yeah, they don't define quote unquote success necessarily.
Right. It's like
Singularly.
That's just, the scorecard of where you ended up. But the goal and the focus is the thing that you do to make it happen.
Right. Well, it's just like net income.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like that's just a derivative of all the work.
Right.
Right.
It's the final number.
And it isn't 100% indicative of the total, success of the year. Again, because, 1 year net profit might shrink where you performed exceptionally well on everything, but you also decided to invest a lot of your, extra cash flow into something else for the future.
For the future, exactly.
Right? So it's like evening all that out is really, really critical in outlining that to the company. This was a great year in sales, net contribution, all these things we improved on, and you'll see that the net income went down. Here's why.
Yes.
So this year was ultra successful,
And it's difficult to define the success when you're only illustrating with half of the picture. When you're just using 3 or 4 numbers or 5 numbers out of this huge scope. We could pick so many numbers to focus on that makes things look skewed a certain way.
Yeah. Good or bad.
When it doesn't give the full picture. So this budget season is also giving us an opportunity to kind of revamp our philosophy on goal setting.
Right.
To be able to expand it and make it a little bigger and more important than just a few metrics.
This is just how I've always looked at budgeting in general. It's just a question I always ask myself when I'm working on a budget or finalizing one is like the 5-year me in the future, like I'm 43 now. In 5 years when I'm 48, does this get me closer to that nebulous what I want to see myself in 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, what am I advancing in this specific period that I'm working on?
Mm-hmm.
What am I doing to get me to that, nebulous, whatever you have in your head?
Right.
And for us, it's collective,
Mm-hmm.
But does this make Berks Homes the company we want to be in 5 years? Does it advance that?
Mm-hmm.
Or do we go backwards?
Right.
And that's like there's so much weight in that question because it's not about that final net income number, but like whatever it is, like you said, if we're investing in technology this year and that's going to, hit our net income number, is that what we want for our 5-year future?
Yeah, exactly. And the way that you frame it by saying we spent as much money as we expected to and invested in technology, and now we have this wonderful tool, we won this year.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want to be able to say, not, well, our net income was reduced because of technology. Because that's like a negative connotation. No, we're saying we happily invested in this because we love to provide our team with the tools that they need to do their job well, and we're going to be so much more efficient next year.
Right.
Which will inevitably make the net income better long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One dip this year for a gain in the next 5. Fantastic. I'll take that win all day. But sometimes it's difficult to explain all the reasons why a number looks a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important for us to try our best, but I also want to make it easy to celebrate the wins and the things that we care about and, kind of go after the good stuff.
Well, it's not binary, like winning
Right.
and losing. It's not like you won or lost.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're trying to say, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It can be a little bit of both sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's almost like it can be binary. It can be, these are the rules of the game, but I'm saying we want to change the rules of the game sometimes.
Yes.
It doesn't always have to be that we're very much aligned with a baseball theme here,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't have, like football, they changed the kick return rules.
Yeah.
Well, we just changed some of the rules a little bit.
Well, it's words matter,
Mm-hmm.
right? How you tell that story and like you said, celebrate something that's not on the balance sheet or the P&L,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Exactly.
We're talking about budget season, so it's on the P&L,
Mm-hmm.
but it's kind of like directing those dollars towards this point of emphasis
Mm-hmm.
will produce a victory for us.
Yes.
Even though we're spending more money on this than we did last year.
Exactly. But we believe that these numbers will be better because of that investment.
Right.
So it's not just picking and choosing the few numbers that we want to focus on. It's looking at the picture as a whole.
Yeah.
A reduction here is an increase here, or
Mm-hmm.
an increase here is a net neutral then.
Right.
We want to be able to explain that across the board and put our focus to, again, what we think everybody cares about.
And sometimes it's like the intangibles as well are just as important in explaining. I'll give you an example. Because of some of the cost reductions that we implemented last year on the expense side, like insurance, and we were able to do really well last year on our insurance package across the board in a time when insurance has been really crazy. And we were able to share some of that savings with the employees.
Yes.
And say, well, this is a win because we're able to provide, each employee with a little more security, a better package for less dollars, and also, give you a head start on your HSA.
Yes.
Right? That was a win that if we just took all the savings and threw it down at the bottom line, everybody would have saw that and would have been like, oh, hey, that was good, but by distributing it, it was even a better win.
Exactly. Yes. And those are the decisions we get to make when we're in this process. And that shows, too, what we care about.
Mm-hmm.
That's, again, putting our dollars where we think is important.
Right.
And that was a fantastic thing that we were able to do last year.
Right. Yeah. So it's just connecting each line item with the purpose. And, I think right now, comparatively speaking to previous years, we're ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On our budgeting.
On the timing of everything, for sure.
Yeah.
And I like what you just said with everything. Every line item has a purpose. And that's going back to every part of the budget has an owner and somebody looking at it. There isn't something that we're doing that we're just doing it again because we did it last year. There is a real reason behind it, and that's part of the conversation and collaboration between everyone to say, do you still need that? Or, I don't still need this, like bringing it up because they own it.
Yeah, it's very different in a private business, like...
You don't have to spend the surplus.
Yeah, like with the government, it's like they don't want to lose their funding on something, so they always ask for it, and then they end up just spending it on ridiculous things, so they get the same amount the following year, just in case.
Yeah.
And I think that the last few years we've had some really good discussions around everybody's budget and spending, and being like, you know what, I don't need that. Like, I'd rather do this, or I'd rather contribute to some cost savings here. And it's a fine line, because you don't want to get to the point where you're just like so obsessed with
cutting
everything that you're just like, this is just like the no fun zone.
Yeah.
Because there is a critical piece of your budget that has a lot to do with your people and, their enjoyment. But if you're just like, we only buy 5 mice a year, so if yours takes a crap, you got to buy it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't want it to be so stringent that it's just like people are just bringing their own napkins to work. But there's a balance, and sometimes when you when you cut something, there's a growing pain, season of trying to figure out how to manage to that new number.
Yeah.
But 9 times out of 10, you just get more creative. And my experience, that's why you said earlier, it's like sometimes it's just not something that you can do in a calendar year. It's just a year by year. You're like testing it out.
Yes.
And you're seeing, and you're like, oh, what was this experience last year on this line item? Because we're over by 50%. And, is that necessary? And somebody's like, yeah, that's what it is. I was just wrong.
That happens.
And that happens. And that's totally okay.
Yeah.
But my experience in the past has been like, if you have a good plan to reduce something, you don't miss it.
Yeah. It's the planning.
You get more creative. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's, again, like I said, what I enjoy about this is sometimes the rules, the box that you're put in makes the creativity happen.
Yes.
And that is the other piece is, okay, well, what can you do with what we have? It doesn't mean that we're just cutting, and it doesn't mean that there's no other opportunity, but get creative. If you can figure out a way to make it happen with inside this box,
right?
Let's go. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that we can't do something. It doesn't have to be yes or no, all or nothing. There can be iteration, again, depending on the timing of it. It could be setting the stage for something else. It could be working with somebody else to say,
do you have any ideas?
Yeah. And the fact that we have 2 levers here. We have spending less and making more, always. I think that they go so hand in hand. And, Angie does a great job of tracking whenever she is adding a new option to the selection gallery. Every time they sell it for the first couple of weeks, it's cash that we didn't have before.
Yep.
So there's an opportunity to be more creative with selling options or changing your tactics of packaging things together, or
your offerings.
Your offerings. There's so many ways to get creative.
Right.
Maybe our settlements goal remains the same, but we just blow it out of the water with how we sell options next year.
Yeah.
That maybe we get the same amount of leads or less, but we increase the
conversion.
Exactly.
I think it's really important for, as many people involved as possible to get that collaboration.
Yes.
Because oftentimes the people that have the best ideas aren't like 100% accountable for it.
Right.
Because it's kind of like walking past something every day.
When
you
get immune to it.
Yeah, it's just like you don't see it anymore. And so, and it's always a little easier to criticize your neighbor than yourself. So you're just, what are you doing over there? You know what I mean? So you can find a lot of great ideas from people that are adjacent and not directly involved.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I can think of a couple examples in years past where somebody just kind of noticed and had an idea, and it helped, the budget owner to look at something differently, because they just never did.
And even in the budgeting process, maybe we say, okay, we really want to spend less on landscaping this year. And that's when somebody else might jump in and be like, actually, please no. We have a hard enough time as it is with people giving us negative feedback on our lack of landscaping.
Yeah, right.
Please don't cut that.
Right.
Or, it's a collaboration between what everybody as the collective knows to be working and what's not. Because sometimes you don't know how your actions impact the person before and after you.
And then it gets bubbled up at some point. We develop this whole theme of what we want to achieve, top line revenue, priorities on spending. And then there's let's just call it 10 decisions that need to be made. And I don't know that we have a tried and true process for that. We just talk it out.
Yeah.
Where do you want to go with this? Because we might have somebody that says we need to spend more on landscaping. We might have somebody that says we need to spend less. And then that just becomes like a feel thing for us.
Yeah.
I mean,
or
really.
even where we set up a test case.
Yeah.
You know, we say, okay, we're going to budget in the middle. We're going to keep it the same this year.
Right.
And then we're going to try this first and then that.
Right.
You know,
Right.
it gives us the chance to test people's theories too.
I think the underappreciated piece in budgeting season is the data that you might get the previous 10 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my point is, if you're owning your budget really well, you're coming into that meeting top of mind already.
Yeah,
I don't need
it's
to
not
go
a lot
do
of
my
work.
I don't need to go do my research.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because we get financials every month. You have
Mhm.
the ability to get your budget any day
Mhm.
of the year and see where you're at
Mhm.
and do your research on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
And bonus points if you've been here 5 years
Mhm.
and now you have 5 years
Yeah.
of experience in it. Some of that's tough to track. The reason it's collaborative is because it can go by volume,
Mhm.
some of it.
Yeah.
But I love it.
That's budgeting season. We're doing a lot of planning right now, a lot of collaborating, and it's pretty exciting actually.
Making decisions.
Mhm.
Yeah. Do you have a shout out?
I do. Speaking of cell phones and budgets and cost savings, I just, wanted to give Jaden a shout out.
Cuzzy.
Yes. He has given us back a lot of dollars this year and his whole team, and they've done a fantastic job just working through line item by line item. What do we need? What don't we? What can we do better? And it has made a really big impact on our bottom line the whole year. And I can see they're already going to do it again next year.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Mhm.
I mean, he's done a great job. Efficiency is something that comes to mind with those guys.
Yeah.
Like they're just really trying to maximize whatever they can with as little as possible.
Yeah, exactly. Doing a great job.
Oh, that's a good shout out.
And let's see. I'm just in budget world. I don't even know what's coming next. We had John D last week, so
Yeah.
I don't know. It's all downhill from here.
Seriously. Are we doing an interview next week or in a couple weeks?
Probably a couple weeks.
Yeah.
I think it's
Okay.
once a month.
Okay.
So you're stuck with
All right.
us again
Okay.
next week.
Good deal.
All right.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.